Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with Auto Success Magazine and Babcock's Media. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today for this Auto Success webinar. Today, my guest is Chase Abbott from VinSolutions, a guest we've had on several times, and I've seen the presentation. It's a good one. You're in for a treat today. Just as always, you've got a lot of really good stuff to share with you. During this webinar, please, as we go through, if you think of questions, type them in or raise your hand. By seeing when you ask the question, it helps me to frame the question better based on what content Chase is talking about at the time it comes in. Now, we're going to hold the questions until the end, and the way that you ask the question is if you're on a laptop, if you're on a desktop, or if you're on a tablet, there'll be a GoToWebinar pane on the right side of your screen. Near the bottom, it says questions. You click on that little triangle to the left of questions. It opens up a box. You type in your question, hit enter, and the question's been submitted to me. And then I'll give that to Chase. Now, if you're on a mobile device, they're all a little bit different, Android or Apple, and even the manufacturers, some of them work different. You're either going to have a header, a footer, or a picture frame around your screen. And somewhere on there, you'll see a question mark. You touch it, it opens up, you type in your question, and then depending on your device, some devices you can swipe to come back to the webinar. Other ones, you'll have to look for a second icon that kind of looks like a flat screen television, and that'll bring you back to the webinar. Now, for any reason, if you click the wrong button or whatever happens and you get kicked out of the webinar, use the exact same link and the exact same phone number that you used to join us right now, and it'll bring you right back in, so you can come right back and join us. Now, a couple of things I want to mention to you before we get started is if you haven't been to Auto Success Online lately, we've got a lot of new content on our website. And once you're there, you can read the past magazines. You can sign up for our newsletter. You'll be able to see all the future webinars and watch recordings of some of our past webinars. And if there's a topic that you would like to see or a guest that somehow we've overlooked that you feel would be valuable to our audience, please shoot me an email or reach out to me through social media and let me know what you'd like to see, and I'll do my best to make it happen. Now, if you have not joined Auto Success Webinars yet on Facebook, it's a group, and I'd like to invite you to join. Just type it in the search, Auto Success Webinars, and once you join that group, it's a place and it's a forum for you to interact with each other, with our speakers, with our Auto Success staff, and and we'll try to get you answers to any questions that you have. Now, with that being said, I'd like to turn the floor over to Chase. Chase, my friend, please take it away.
Brian, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone that took time out of your day to dial into the webinar today. Hopefully, I will leave you with some very good things that you can use in your dealership or even give you a new, fresh insight on some of the things that are coming down the pike with our industry and how we can better serve those things to become more proactive. Now, as you're seeing at the top of the webinar, it says GoPros, all right? So we're not talking about cameras here. We're talking about going proactive and really harnessing the power of that and what that is and what that means to transform your dealership and reside on the cutting edge and not really try to play catch up, especially with your competitors, right? So let me give you just a little quick background on me and really why I think I'm fit to speak to you about this topic today. So I've been at VinSolutions for a decade next month. Since we were a little bitty startup and seen a ton of things from all the way through to being a startup to rocket ship sales and now being a part of the biggest company in automotive. But before that, I spent 5 years on the retail side of the business and held chairs from just being a salesperson all the way to internet manager, general manager, finance director. So worked my way through all the chairs. And I really feel that's given me a unique insight being on both sides of the fence here to give you some best practices, some really progressive ideas, and some things to think about as you go into 2018 and as you prepare to go out and hit your goals and beat your competition. So with that, we're going to get rolling through the webinar. And the first thing we need to really look at is why are we here, right? Why are we here today? Why are U.S. car sales falling, right? We all have seen this. It's been tweeted. Will monthly auto sales decline again for the 8th straight month, right? So we definitely have some issues out there with the amount of cars that are being sold versus the last, 10 years or so of historical data that we've constantly been increasing. Really, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you're well aware the market is not really ideal. After 7 straight years of growth, following the '08 recession, we had a record-breaking 17.55 million vehicles sold in 2016, and really not a surprise that in 2017, we're not going to top that. And likely in 18, we won't either. Now, there's not really a reason to panic here. We've been in business a long time. We know how to sell cars. The downturn's not going to last forever. But the folks that reside on the very proactive edge of this can really do well, as the other dealerships in your market will just be going, woe is me, right? Well, the auto industry is on the brink of a decline. So obviously there's definitely some concern, and we need to do some things to get ahead of this. Anticipation is key to a lot of winning in business, and doesn't change here. First, I want to also talk about reactive and proactive, and just set a real quick baseline on what exactly that is, right? So reactive being acting in response, something happened to me, versus proactive, right? And I made something happen. And that's where you need to look at, the question you need to ask yourself right now is, which side of this are you on? Are you on the left or are you on the right? And maybe you need to do some self-reflection to get yourself right. If you're going to champion this proactive transformation for your dealership, if you're going to champion that, you need to really make sure that you're on the blue side of this. And right now you may be on the red, but a lot of this, reactive versus proactive, is just like life. It's simply a choice, and it's a choice that you have to make, and I think that you'll find the ROI is much better on the right side of the screen. So you may need to go do some self-reflection. You need to think about what side of this your staff is on, what side is your manager on, that you're going to pitch taking these new big leaps to try to increase the ROI for your dealership. It's really important to set that baseline, because if you don't, it's going to be extremely hard for you to measure your progress, right? And it starts with you and you taking the time out of your day to listen to this webinar is the very first step. So congratulations, and hopefully, like I said, I'll leave you with a few things that you can really take and roll out in your store. So this isn't a mountain, but it does kind of look like one. Have we reached the summit of vehicle sales? And if you can see at the very right side of that graph, you can see the tail off, right? And it's starting to tail off. So we definitely have a situation to where it's just not going to bear as much fruit as it has been. And so as long as we can put some proactive measures in place and not reactive, I think a lot of people can do extremely well. In the stock market crash back in 1929, a very few select group of folks made a ton of money while everyone else lost their shirts. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but anticipation and having a plan is what was really key to their success and yours as well. So here's the reality, right, with today's industry. There's tighter competition. There's dealerships everywhere. Independents have really came a long way in the last 10 or 20 years. So the competition is tighter, and you've got to deal with that. And it's less about price these days, and it's more about experience, right? So we need to focus on the competition, what they're doing, and see how we can edge them out in a market that's somewhat at parity from OEM to OEM. There's lower margins, right? Less gross is being made now than ever before, so the margins are tighter. So you need more volume, right, in order to hit your plans, right? You have to sell more cars if they're at a less per copy or a per clip. So lower margins, definitely a reality in the car business. Longer sales cycles. Because the sales cycles now are initiated online, that's kind of really when the sales cycle starts. So because of that, because of the internet and all the research that's done these days, it really makes for a longer sales cycle from the very first click until you get that car over the curb and it's delivered. And then overwhelming technology. If any of you go to NADA and walk on the floor, it can be extremely overwhelming with the amount of vendors out there that have great solutions. And trust me, there are a lot of great solutions out there. But there's not really anybody to shepherd you around all the different places to see if this stuff really works together and if it really connects and ultimately saves you time. So because of that, it can be super overwhelming, and it's really hard to know that the decision you made is 100% accurate unless you've got a really good lay of the land as far as connections, integrations, and how all this stuff works together. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be left holding the bag at the dealership with the tools that you've chosen, and you just want to make sure that there was some thought into that, right? Because once you get them installed in the store, you've got a number to hit. It may be too late to go fix it. So that is the reality in automotive today. Those are 4 key pillars that the business is facing. And just wanted to throw that out there so we could kind of set a baseline now on what the market's like today. So doesn't mean we can't succeed. Like I said, preparation equals success. Just because the market is down, it doesn't mean you can't make money. If you're prepared and you approach the business the right way, you can really edge out your competition and really continue to grow your business in any market out there. I mean, selling demand only changes the size of the pie. The size of your slice of that pie is up to you, right? So the pie's still going to be there. How much you get of it is how proactive you are going into this downturn on the number of units sold in the United States. So the proactive approach. So as we gear up for 18, we start moving there. Time to start taking a really good hard look at what can we do to be more proactive, to pull more things to head, to get ahead of our competition, to get ahead of our customers, to get ahead of our inventory, so that we can become proactive and have ultimate sustainability behind that, so that our ROI potential with the store is much, much higher than it was being reactive. So first off, the old way, right? Does everybody remember the purple gorilla? I do. The only problem with the gray ape there is the only ones I've ever really seen in the wild are tethered to dealerships and are completely irrelevant when it comes to me buying a car. But we still blow them up. We still put them out there. I remember doing balloons on Saturday. It was a huge deal. It just seems funny now because you used to only get that traffic if the customer drove down your street or Main Street or whatever street your dealership's on. And now Main Street is the internet, right? So tear down your purple gorilla, take a picture of it if you want for a memento, and then maybe you post that picture up on your homepage or your website, because that's truly Main Street these days. That is completely an old way. But I guarantee you some of you still have one of those back in the wash bay stowed away for a rainy day. Index cards and the white pages. When I started in the car business in 2003, I got this. I had a Stuker box, which was my phone training box, and I kept my 3x5 index card. That was my CRM. And the marketing campaign was right below that. That's the white pages. I was literally handed one of those on day one with zero training and went to work. And I just think we can do better, folks. And I guarantee you some of you guys are doing a much better job than my dealership that I worked at. But that was the baseline. That's the old way. And some of the folks that I talked to thousands of dealerships, are still doing things like this, which is just, it's a little crazy, right? So we've got to progress. We've got to keep going. If somebody, I always love the one, if they asked Henry Ford what the people wanted, they just would have said faster horses. But instead, we went and we did cars instead of automobiles, right? So it's a very key thing to look at this with a fresh set of eyes and not just get stuck in the doldrums on, the way we've done it in the past. 41% of folks surveyed are frustrated with the amount of time it takes to purchase a car. This used to be higher. So we've definitely gotten better. But the key metric here is 90 minutes. You only have 90 minutes before customer satisfaction starts to drop sharply. That is the time span. Now, keep that in mind. Some people want to buy a car in 5 minutes. You got companies like Carvana that they just want to go as fast as they can. And you got folks like me that are car guys that I kind of like the process. I'm cool if I'm there for 3 or 4 hours, right? I had a good time. But the key thing is your process that you have has to be able to work on both sides of that, or do its darndest to get there, right? Because with this metric, there's definitely some demand to make our deals move more fluently and less duplication, less double entry, so that we can get that customer in and out, have them get a great experience and not sacrifice growth at all. Less than 1% of consumers like the car buying process, right? 4,002 customers were surveyed in this one. Only 17 of them said that they liked the car buying process. I got to go out on a limb here, and I think the DMV would probably be higher. So the good news is we've only got one way to go, and that's up. So we can definitely improve the car buying process to get it off that schneid of 1%. So what's changed, right? So since the old days, 60% of the car shopper's time is spent online. This was a study that we did at Cox Automotive. 55% of all buyers only test drive one vehicle. That's because of online information. You can get so much more now online when before you had to go talk to a salesman, you had to go pick up a book, on the product book on the car, on the showroom, to really learn about anything about the new cars that came out. And all of that now has been moved online, and really what's left for most Progressive customers is just a transaction at the dealership. You know, they know how it drives because they read 355 reviews about how it drives, and they can find trends in that data and see where they lie. And a lot of folks are content with that, right? So very key metric that you really need to make sure your inventory online is standing tall and priced accurately, because you may only get one shot or no shots if you don't have everything squared away on the merchandising side. 38% all buyers only visited the dealership where they purchased. Again, they had the right inventory, the right price, the right situation. I felt like I was getting a good experience. I bought the car, right? So definitely make sure that you have everything in sync from online to in-store so that the customer has a fluid experience and they don't get polar opposites on one side of that process, right? So today's successful dealer, we want to talk about what are they doing, right? Because we kind of set the baseline there on where we're at today and the problems that we all face, right? So now we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means to be proactive and what I see some of the most successful dealers out there in the country today doing to become and maintain being proactive. First off, you've got to take stock, right? And you've got to make sure that you're in a position to go this way. It's not a flip of a switch. It's not going to be easy, right? Because of the turnover we face sometimes in the car business. So you've got to make sure that the decision to be proactive is a great start. There's several actions management must take to really enable a truly proactive staff. So of the thousands of dealerships that I talked to, there were 6 key things that you need to take stock of when beginning this process. And here are the 6. You need to take stock of your staff, like I said. If you've got managers that harbor bad behavior and have been there 25 years, and nobody has the confidence to go let them go, maybe you need to think about it, right? Not saying everybody in that situation, but if they're harboring or fostering bad behavior, it's going to be really hard to make your dealership 100 when it comes to the proactive front, right? So you need to take stock of the staff. You need to take stock of your current processes and make sure that you've got levels of customization in your current follow-up processes, whether that be for internet leads or unsold showroom follow-up. You need to take stock of that and make sure that there's a certain amount of relevancy in those processes. And it's not just one template going to every single customer, making them feel completely like a number. Also, you need to take stock of your current technology base and what you have. How well does it integrate? How many times do I type a customer's first name and last name in order to do a deal? Is that heartburn for me? Take stock of your tech stack. Take stock of your contracts, right? If you're going to start making changes and looking at things with a fresh set of eyes, you're going to need to know if you're in long-term contracts. And maybe you just started at the store and they signed one 4 years ago that you don't even know about. I see that a lot where folks are in contracts that don't even know about them. So definitely something to check on. And you should do these things just every quarter, right? But especially before you try to do a big switch and go take your dealership proactive, especially if you're in that reactive category. If you're on the line somewhere, it's not such a big culture shock. But definitely steps that you need to take is look at those contracts. And then metrics, you know, of the reporting of all the stuff we enter into all these software pieces and all these tools, all the customer stuff we log, what does that say? What does it tell me to do, right? Because the reason we report and the reason we have metrics is to give us shortcuts to coaching and training so that we can go talk with our folks and make them better and take the short path to get there and know exactly where that salesperson is falling short, right? Or that manager, when it comes to taking TOs, is falling short. So we have to assess the metrics and kind of rank our folks to know exactly where we need to put our chips on coaching, training, and ultimately culture, just getting it better. And then really we need to set goals, right? You can't really do anything, in my opinion, without goals. So you have to set that baseline like we talked about at the beginning, and then ultimately set a goal for yourself. And I always recommend setting a realistic goal. Don't get delusions of grandeur and set some humongous goal for yourself that's 2 years out, because you get lost in the gray. Give yourself a set of milestone goals that you can hit and show that progress, especially if you're in middle management trying to pitch something, some big changes, or even minor changes to a GM or a dealer principal. Go in there with a lot of data and goals and make sure that they're attainable. So as you go, you're making sure that your neck's not on the line by not hitting some huge goal that you set for yourself, right? You want to make sure that they're attainable, not under, but attainable. And then ultimately, after you set that and you look at those 6 key triggers and you loop in your folks, you're going to want to take action. And it's going to be a little bit by committee. You can't just go in there and change everything in a dealership just by yourself, right? You've got to pull in used car department. You've got to pull in new parts, service, the detail folks, whatever it is, whatever we're trying to change, the office, and take action. But if you pull those people in, they will have a sense of ownership of it. If you do not and you tell them what they have to do, this will blow up in your face like any other thing that you try to implement. You have to make these folks part of the decision. And the good news is if you do that, you'll probably find some things you didn't even think of that are more relevant to their department, which helps serve that department better, which is really what we're trying to do throughout this whole process, right? So take action, but keep those key things in mind about looping people in and making them feel part of the decision. Humongously important in any business, and especially with rolling out new initiatives and being innovative. So with that, we want to talk about the management, right, and how we're going to go proactive around that. And the first one to look at here is culture. And look, this is a word that's used a lot. I use it a lot. And it's the first thing that we need to do, and you can boil culture back down to a lot of things, but the first thing we got to do is take a big step back and look at your dealership with a fresh set of eyes. Determine the baselines of where you're currently at, like we talked about. Is your dealership a revolving door? Are there people coming in new and getting fired all the time? Or is it the opposite? Do you have a very tenured, long-term staff of employees? That's going to change some of your decisions throughout this process, and will gauge kind of where success lies for you based off of where you're at today. What's the current CSI level in your store? Good question to ask yourself. And are we surveying the employees? Are we asking them? Are we interviewing them about the culture, about how we can make it better? A lot of times to build a quality culture, all you have to do is ask them, right? And that doesn't happen. So they just assume they know what the sales folks want, or they assume they know what middle management wants. And that's not really the best way to go about it. Plus, if you just ask these folks, they feel like they've got a seat at the table, right? And that principle, kind of plays again to build that culture. Building culture can be done in a lot of ways, right? And they're really kind of specific to the business and vary depending on each one. However, in my experience doing this a while, there's one principle that I found that really accelerates culture, and that is marketing. And you're probably saying, what in the world is this guy talking about, marketing? But to really build a winning culture, you got to do things to make it win, right? That's key. You're changing processes, eliminating issues, extra steps, eliminating extra clicks. You got to bring in donuts every once in a while in the morning, maybe lunch on the last day of the month, so they don't leave and we can sell a few more cars. Time off, work-life balance, a lot of good practices to implement. But the problem I see, or the area I see them fail in, is marketing and remarketing the employee to the employees of all this positive change. You have to stoke the culture fire daily as a manager. And trust me, you'll run out of changes. You will, I guarantee you. So you need to put in a plan or a process, or at least have the thought process to say, how am I going to reintroduce some of this stuff, or maybe put a different spin on something that may have rolled out in the past or tweaked since then, by simply asking your staff about the culture and how to improve upon it helps build the culture probably more than just about anything. So keep that in mind as we try to shift from the dealerships of old and all the negative pitfalls, and I don't have any free time and I work 6 days a week and they keep changing the pay plan every time I make money. It doesn't have to be that way. And we're the ones that are responsible to change that by putting in practices and processes like this. And it does not have to be that way. It can evolve, it can grow, and it can get better. And some of the stats we've seen already can help, lend itself to that. So here's a metric that you can say if you're trying to sell this up the chain. Low-level engagement, a 33% decrease in operating income and an 11% decrease in earnings growth. While on the other side of that, high-level engagement is 19% increase and an operating income expense or increase of 28%. So you can see the delta between those two is pretty vast. And dealerships, businesses with more high-level engaged folks, every single thing that comes across their desk or through their processor is going to go better because they're a highly engaged, confident staff that feels like they're in the right spot. So make sure you know where you lie on this scale, but know what's possible with looking at these metrics. The other thing I want to talk to you about is cross-departmental communication. Are your departments communicating? Is used cars talking to new cars? Is finance on an island and they're mad at the desk because they're not giving them enough leg and deals? You know, whatever the case may be. Are they sharing best practices? Are they working together to serve the car deal the best? You know, when I was in the car business, we used to have spiffs that would pit me against another manager. So what ended up happening is I wouldn't share anything that was going swimmingly. I would just hold it all close to the vest because I wanted to win the competition. And now that I look back on it, it was just crazy to me because I was withholding things, omitting things that he maybe could have used. And maybe he had a treasure trove of stuff that he could have helped me on or given me a little bit more in a trade. And just weren't talking, right? So the cross-departmental communication is huge. There's mountains of evidence that teams aren't collaborating, right, with outside of their own department. So, you know, unsurprisingly, most of the value in cross-departmental collaboration, but many dealerships fail to recognize the commitment to the cause, right? They must be in place for the lines of communication to stay open. It's management's role, as we're on the pro-management section of this, to make sure that this is happening. And that could be a weekly meeting amongst all the departments, whatever you think is best to serve you in your store, but just make sure it's happening. There is a treasure trove of good data, but you got to make sure that the lines are open to communicate that back and forth. 39% of surveyed employees believe that the people in their own organization don't collaborate enough. So that's self-reflection. 4 out of 10 people aren't collaborating enough. 86%, this is an overwhelming stat, of employees and executives cite lack of collaboration or ineffective communication for workplace failures. So it looks like to me that this is really the root or the cause of a lot of these problems we've already talked about. So if you can, you know, cut it off at the root, there's a lot less that's going to grow off from that and cause problems for you. So keep in mind how important that is, and sometimes I think it just gets glossed over in dealerships today. All right, so on the sales front, we're going to talk a little bit about what can we do proactive-wise on the sales front to go get some more deals, to bring them into this new management culture that we just talked about. So the first one and the biggest one really that this revolves around is you have to disrupt the sales cycle. You have to tell customers that they're in the market before they know they're in the market. And the only way to really go do that, other than just having a relationship with them, is technology. And having indicators tip you off when some, you know, a person or a customer might be in equity or a lease turn-in's coming due. You have to disrupt the sales cycle to move that average trade cycle from 3 to 4 years up when possible, especially in a downturn like this that we're looking at with the number of car sales being sold, to make yourself, you know, sustain success as you go through this downturn, especially versus your competition. One thing I really want to talk about while we talk about bringing in more sales is this. I think this is a humongous filter at the top of your sales funnel. Some dealerships I see do a fantastic job here. Most do not. And that is with your Google reviews, with Dealer Rater if you're on there, and also with Glassdoor. You're not going to hear a lot of webinars in automotive talk about this website. Glassdoor is a review, an employer review. So sometimes dealerships will have a Glassdoor page, and it is atrocious, some of the things that are posted on there. I see that on Google reviews as well. So with reviews being so popular today, you really want to make sure that you look right to the market, because there's a whole other thing going on before lead conversion and what all these vendors are talking to you about. That's my lead. No, I converted that lead. No, it came from here. No, it came from there. It's not necessarily about that in this conversation. It's about all the people that didn't even bother to submit anything because they saw your reviews ahead of time, right? So you've got to make sure. The second tip I'll give you, make sure if you have online reviews, and you need to, that they have responses to the positive and the negative, but especially the negative. An unanswered negative review does way more harm than positive reviews do good. So you have to make sure that you're on there responding, because that's an active and engaged owner or an active and engaged management staff. And customers love that. They want to know that if they have a problem, it's going to get resolved. And all of these online reviews are windows into that. So you have to make sure you're standing tall when it comes to that landscape. And here's just a couple metrics if you're trying to sell this up the chain to get better on your reviews, or maybe spend here or put somebody in charge of it. 97%, right? So let's just call it 100. Read online reviews before local businesses in 2017. 85% of consumers trust those reviews much as any other recommendation, maybe from their mom or their cousin or something, right? So it's so on steroids now that there are people on Amazon and all kinds of different sites, but especially on Amazon, posting up fake reviews. And if that's where we're at, you got to make sure you're playing well in that arena. It's so important to make sure you respond to those, and ultimately that you take stock and try to improve, upon them. So what are a couple of the key ready-to-buy indicators that we want to talk about when pulling these people ahead and getting them in the dealership earlier? Equity indicators. Question, do you have them now? Are you utilizing them? Do you have an idea of where any customer in your database that's bought a car from you, do you have any idea if they're in equity or out of equity? Would you be able to figure it if you tried? There are solutions out there that can make this very, very easy for you. One of the things you got to do, though, is make sure you're playing there, because equity standing and pulling people ahead based on that, humongous ROI right now with very specific campaigns. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Service and activity history. Big shop bills equal trade-ins, right? If somebody has a $4,000 shop bill, you can trade them out of that car. They don't have to pay the $4,000. They get a brand new car for a similar payment, and everybody wins, right? But does your salesperson know that that customer is in service? Is it even going to start? Is it even going to happen? Is the service writer going to know to bring that up, right? Or is he just going to go, ooh, $4,000 ticket, my lines are great on this RO, let's go, right? So is that collaboration, that glue, sticky enough to make sure that those kinds of things can happen? Because who wins in that scenario is the dealership, right? You got a brand new used car to go on your lot that you took from trade. You sold a new car. You still got an RO. You got it ready for the lot through the PDI process. So service activity and the history there, and being able to leverage that when the timing is right, humongous returns to pull people ahead and get them back in the market before they necessarily think they are. And then last but not least is website activity. There are vendors out there right now that give you live traffic views of your website so that you can see in real time what's going on, what are people searching for, what are the cars that are clicked on the most. There are also those tools will do things like if you convert that customer and they fill out anything, an oil change form, a test drive form, more information, FAQ, contact us, whatever. We can convert that customer to a known customer, and then we track their IP address, and we can see everything about them, right? There are vendors out there right now, multiple vendors that do that. And the cool thing about something like that is you can really get down into the customer's kind of thought processes and know and have a really good intuition about the way this deal needs to go. And if we need to call an audible, then the way that needs to go, because you're seeing the entire customer's click path, how much money down they entered, how many cars they searched for, was it only trucks, was it just cars, without the customer even knowing it. So that's where technology is today. But you've got to go and embrace it and find that connectivity to give you those kinds of insights at the the tip of your fingers that you can go use and leverage immediately in your dealership today. Segmented campaigns. We're going to talk a little bit more about equity now. Segmented campaigns always beat on segmented campaigns. Research from PCG revealed dealers who create highly customized campaigns, so like 6, 8, 10 templates, right, whatever, and you send that to 250 customers instead of one template to 5,000 customers, are seeing a much better ROI because of the relevancy that's installed in these campaigns. I mean, why is it this way now? Why do we have to go into all these little bitty campaigns? Technology limitations over the years really have, made the one template to 5,000 customers the only way to do it. The other reason is just good old laziness, because people don't want to go make 8 email templates and send out 8 campaigns when they can just do one and tell their boss they're campaigning. But in today's dealership, the technology providers now have solutions and teams of people to help segment your data for you and form a partnership that really produces some fabulous ROI and gives some thought process and creative engine behind how we're going to go out, segment our data, look at smaller pieces of the puzzle, and make sure that we're marketing relevancy to them. We had one dealer that sent out an oil change coupon, but since he couldn't segment his data, he sent it to everybody in his customer base. The problem was it was the 1995 oil change, and then all the diesel guys showed up because they can't segment their data. And then they have to give $100 and something oil changes for 1995, and the guy's going, wow, man, we really messed that up. We lost a ton of money on this deal. That's what segmenting your data can do. It's relevancy, specificity, so that we can market something that really hits home to the customer that's receiving it, and not just doing hope and spray and sending campaigns or hibachi grills to zip codes like I used to do back in the day. So they will always be segmented. Will always be unsegmented. What you need to do is make sure that you have an engine that can go segment and be able to get relevant with these customers, because what you want to say and what they're interested in are two different things, and where you want to lie is in the blue there in the middle, and that's finding key things of the data you already have and using that to make the situation, the experience, and the scenario extremely relevant to your customers. Because when you do that, you'll have this 14% higher open rates on emails. This is huge, 101% higher click rates on those emails, and 9% lower unsubscribe rates, because we're doing things like using the customer's first name, we're using their current vehicle, we're pulling down their equity, we're using their current position. So when somebody gets something like that, it's very different than, hey, it's truck month, right? It's not truck month. This means something to me that's got my name, my car. Let me take a little harder look at this. And that's what we have to drive, because that's who's winning in today's dealership for being the most progressive store. Do a very, very good job of this. And then relevancy with that tech. 75% more likely to buy from a retailer that recognizes them. But like I said, by name, recommends options, past purchase, knows their purchase history. That's the key, right? You've got to pull that old data back out and serve it back up to them. So they go, hey, I remember that. Yeah, that's right. That is my stuff. Okay, let me look at this, right? This is custom. Somebody spent some time on this. I should really look at it, right? But really what happened is technology caught up, and we made that automated in a lot of ways. Or we'll have a team of people do it for you with creative thought behind it, where it used to be, if you wanted to do something really custom and make the customer feel good, like the old handwritten notes, they were just a pain, and they took forever, and it wasn't something that you could go put a process behind. And what the good news is, though, is technology's kind of caught up with that now, and we can automate that process, still give extremely relevant messages and offers to your base, but at the same time, not have to sit there and write a bunch of handwritten letters all day, right? It's nirvana. It's finally got there. 63% are highly annoyed by retailers blasting generic messages. I guess the other 37% are just mildly annoyed, but everybody's annoyed, I think. 78% will only engage with offers that are personalized. They won't even look at them. They won't even give them the time of day if it's one of those just big, serve it up to everybody. Hey, we're having a special. Here's the deal. Well, that's not relevant to me. I'm not going to go do the math on if that special is good or not. I want that deal further along. If you're going to serve me something up to try to get me out of the non-buying cycle into the buying cycle, it's got to have a little pizzazz, and it's got to sell. And we can't expect anything else, right? The good news, like I said, there are technology providers that can do this for you, make it really kind of easy. All right, service and going pro with the service department, right? So we all know this one. It's still not happening. It's rampant in the industry. I talk to dealers all the time that still fight this problem. Customers introduced to service at the time of purchase are 2.3 times more likely to return. I'm not reinventing the wheel. We're not breaking ground with this stat. We all know we need to do it. The problem is the execution. And if you can get those folks back in and you have an equity engine and they're coming back into service, wouldn't it be nice to go give them an offer to say, hey, I knew this person was coming in for service. They're in a Maxima. I'm going to give them an offer for a new Maxima with a payment. I'm going to go hand that to them when they come into service, just so they know. That's pretty compelling. And if a person's even remotely close to trading, they're going to take a real hard look at that. Problem is, do you know if your salespeople know their customers are in service? Do they even know they're back there? Are you being proactive about that? Or are you being reactive and waiting for a service writer to come tell you, which is probably never going to happen, right? So be proactive about that and try to make sure you know exactly what's going on in the service drive. Technology can really help you do that. Let you see, who's coming in today and taking things from the back end of the house and making them visible on the front end of the house from the sales staff. So integrated software, the big one, right? How are you going to save time? How are you going to get proactive? How are you going to make sure that your processes, your experiences line up for your customers? Is it going to be consistent? Are they going to feel warm and fuzzy as they're going throughout the process? Or is it going to go cold and they're going to cross their arms and go back to 1978 car buyer, right? Are we really going to make sure that the game we spit, the game we talk is really the one we reflect when they come in the store? So a couple of key points which you need to look at with software, because if I learned anything in the car business, it's this. And that's time kills deals. If we took too much time on the test drive, if we took too much time bidding their car, finance, whatever it was, everything started getting harder immediately. And we talked about the 90-minute stat. For some people, it's like 40 minutes. Some people, it's an hour and 20. But the average is 90, right? So scheduling. There are solutions out there right now that will schedule the first service appointment for you out of the CRM. So you don't have to worry so much about the execution. Do we still want to take them back there and walk them around and introduce them to everybody? Absolutely, because we want them to come back. We don't want them, when they come back, to be their first, experience in service. We want them to have that experience so they feel comfortable with it. They know where the coffee machine is. They know where they need to go for their ROs, blah, blah, blah. Everything feels good because we took the time. But even when that happens, a lot of times this first scheduled service appointment doesn't even get set. They take them back to service, they walk them around, okay, thank you, off they go. And they don't even know that they're supposed to come back. So what you have to make sure of, and as a guy that's dealt with salespeople my entire life, the only way to make sure something happens is to mandate it via technology, in my experience. If you want to make sure that you have metrics around stuff, you have to mandate it, and you have to make sure that you have technology backing up the human error, because the human error is never going to stop. It's always going to be there. And look, people make mistakes. But what you can't have is missing numbers, missing growth, missing opportunities. Technology will be the backstop for all that and really allow you to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. Also, online service scheduling. Do you have a spot where your customer can go online on your website and set their own service appointment? If people go, no, we don't need that. They just call in. I'm telling you now, they don't want to call you. They just want to get online, schedule an appointment, have the entire calendar at their disposal, dovetail into a time that works best for them, and have confidence that that time's going to hold water when they come in. That's what they care about. Everything else beyond that, absolutely. Lay it out there, have the iPad in the drive, make sure everything's impressive, get as many lines on your RO as possible. But a lot of appointments start right there. If I don't want to make it hard for you to do business with me. I want to make it extremely easy. So in order for you to do that, you got to have tools like this to enable you to catch both sides of the customer. Some customers are going to call. Some customers are going to come in. Some customers want to schedule. Are you serving all of those buckets? Do you have the means to serve every one of those? If not, you better do something, because I guarantee you your competitors do, or are on their way to getting a solution out there to handle that. Advanced reporting. The reason, like I said, we enter all this stuff into this tools and all these things and loan to value and price of the used car and how much leg I can leave and how much APR is available in this state. All of it boils back down to reporting to show you trends in that data. So use advanced reporting, especially if you can connect pieces together, to give you insights into what you need to go do. Look, reporting, it's not sexy, right? But what it does is save time. It's there to make you have a fast track to be able to coach and train on the things that mean the most right now without having to build it every single time. It should be a quick stop, check it, this is what's going on, and then get out with your folks and make that dealership proactive. Get ahead of these things. Automated email campaigns, humongous. You want to have campaigns that are set, that are relevant, working with a team of folks, working with just the software piece, if you're doing it all yourself, whatever, you want to make sure that you've got those email campaigns set up, and if at all possible, that they're automated so they happen, right? It's the same thing about mandating the fields that need to be filled out. Same thing here. You want to make sure it's automated so it doesn't happen, because if Jimmy's off and Jimmy sends out the email campaigns, then the email campaigns aren't going out, and that's not good for business. So make sure that you have an automated backstop, and try to get as much technology as you can to make those automated emails as relevant as possible so that you have a much better ROI, and you're not, making people annoyed like we looked at that stat earlier. And then this is a huge one. When I started in the car business, I had to type a customer's first name and last name 7 times to do a deal. Literally. Every single deal I typed 7 times. The good news was I got really good at typing. The bad part was I have a real big problem with inefficiencies, and that was a huge one, and it cost us so much. The guard of the people waiting for finance started to skyrocket because I'm in there typing Shirley 8 times. And it's crazy, right? And it's still going on today. So do everything in your power to eliminate the double entry that keeps you from getting to the gross fields, if you will, right? It does, I guarantee you. And when you're trying to build culture, it's not just about the customer here. Do you think the finance manager loves typing in Shirley 8 times? I guarantee you he or she does not. So if you're trying to build a culture, like I talked about earlier, you want to eliminate clicks, extra steps. You need to be looking at those types of things to make sure your culture is right to provide a good experience, because if your staff's not right, the end result's your customer. And if they're having problems, so are your customer. They're going to have problems as well. So getting ahead of that and trying to eliminate double entry when and wherever possible, extremely, extremely important. So take stock. Ask yourself, how many times do my managers now enter in an address, for instance, to do a deal? If that's more than one, there's better options out there. So look at it now and kind of make sure that you're in the right on that. And then improve speed and efficiency. Everything goes smoother. Everything's more efficient if it's connected as possible. We don't want to go reinvent the wheel, but we simply want to move data from here and this piece of the road to the sale to this piece of the road to the sale without having to do it all over again, right? And it's not too much to ask for, and there are providers out there, there are processes out there that will go do that for you. So what does the integrated software really do for you? Those are probably 5 of the top things that you're going to get if you go down that path, and I guarantee you'll see so many more positive things spawn off of doing some of these things that you really feel that proactiveness in your dealership. I think if you can institute these 5 kind of principles in there and stick to them, once you can check these boxes off, you'll start to see some things go north instead of south. All right, so real quick, I just want to wrap up just some quick key takeaways, right? So on the management side, you got to make sure your culture's right. Use those 6 triggers we talked about to take stock of your current staff. Open the lines of departmental communication up and make sure that your folks are talking. If you don't have a weekly management meeting in your dealership, probably should start having one so that everybody at least gets a voice once a week to go in there and express frustrations, concerns, wins, and share data. Collaboration is humongous, but if it doesn't happen, it's a humongous problem, okay? Pro sales. Disrupt the cycle. Think of things that are relevant to your market. Look at campaigns you've done in the past and ones that you've had ROI on. Think about seasonality. It's Christmas time. Do we want to do an automated, very relevant Christmas offering? Whatever the case may be. Think about things like that and get out of the normal box and just cranking the old same email campaigns to 5,000 people and uncover new opportunities based off those things. And then create as often as you can, highly customized, targeted campaigns to increase your ROI. It's worth your time. I promise you to go do that, especially if you're in charge of the dealership of email marketing or internet and however your store's ran. Hugely important for you to look at customized and targeted offerings. And then service. Make sure that you've got a process to introduce your customers to the service department, and make sure that you've got a process, technology-wise, digitally, to make sure that the fail-safe, the backstop of that happens. Make sure everybody goes through there, because it's service revenue and it's potential more sales revenue. And if you can shorten the trade cycle to 2.5 years, and they don't get completely buried, you can really increase your numbers, increase that trade-in rate, that turn rate, so that you can just realize, that 10, 15, 20 extra deals per month and really take your dealership proactive. And that's the thing, the little wins. And I'm going to tell you, if you get some of these and they're wins, they may be little wins, but a bunch of little wins add up to a big one, right? So don't forget that. Don't get caught off on like, I need to see huge ROI to keep this going. You eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So you've got to make sure that you're keeping true to that, and don't get caught up with not having humongous ROIs right out of the gate. They will come, especially as you get more in tune with what works for your specific customer base. All right, so last but not least, are you ready? Is your dealership ready, right? Take control, go pro. Hopefully you found that some of these things will help you, going forward and how you look at this with a fresh set of eyes. And with that, I really just want to open it up for questions and say thank you guys for taking the time to listen. And like I said, hopefully we picked up a few things along the way. And with that, Brian, I'll turn it back over to you, my man.
Great presentation, Chase. That was great. We do have some questions in. If you have questions, everybody, please type them in now. Our first question is, how do most dealers handle taking away a big ticket RO like the one Chase was referring to? Typically, a big ticket RO is exactly why the service department will not want the sales department minding their service customers.
Yeah, that kind of boils back to pitting the competition against one another. I think the question you need to ask there is what's best for the customer, because without the customer, you have nothing. And if you feel like one way, and usually you will, one way's better to go, then that's the way I would go for the customer. I think if we revolve a lot of our decisions around that principle, because look, they need to come back. They need to service their car again. And if they feel like they got pushed into a sales deal that they didn't really want to do, then they're probably not going to come back. So that probably isn't what's best for the customer. That doesn't mean that you don't need to go ask and inspect what you expect. It may be that the result you find when sales goes back and talks to them, that's not the way to go. But that doesn't mean the conversations don't need to happen. And that's what I'm stressing. Make sure that communication is there to figure out what's best for the customer and ultimately feel good about the decision you make. But I get it. Sales thinks service is robbing them. Service thinks sales is robbing them. But look, we all got to eat at the end of the month, and we're all dependent upon one another, and we can't forget that common principle.
All right. Chase, our next question is, how frequently should we do meetings to gauge our progress, and what are the metrics to measure?
So if you're, this is kind of snowflake, right? Everyone's a snowflake, so it may be a little bit different for your store. I recommend that you meet at least, once every 2 weeks. I'm in corporate America where meetings are very popular, so I don't want to stress doing too many of them. But you do need to check progress, and I would say bi-weekly. Some of the metrics that you need to be looking for are really based upon the goals that you come up with when you take stock in those 6 key steps. Right? What are you trying to do? If it's get better at online reviews, then let's set a metric to see where we're at and what our next milestone goal should be, and let's stay true to that. So it will be specific on the dealership. I would just stress that you need to make sure that the meeting happens, and it can't be a one-off. So if you guys use Outlook or something, put a meeting maker on the calendar as a recurring event every 2 weeks and make sure that it just never goes away. And it will always, always happen. And you can key on metrics in that meeting, and you can hear some of the concerns about what led to those metrics if you have all the players at the table in the room. But success is going to look different for every dealership based off whatever goals they set for themselves in the take stock kind of section of this.
Okay. Our next question, actually, Chase, this question was typed in when you were talking about the bonuses pitting managers against each other. And the question is, are you suggesting shared bonuses across departments? How does that look? And can you give an example?
So, like, I'm suggesting that part of the plan, I guess when I was talking to it the first time, I was talking about spiffs because that's what we used to get in the car business. But the spiff would pit me against him, and I didn't want to work with him. So when I became GSM, I changed all that, and we started doing spiffs that were based off of 85% of the spiff was based off that, let's say for the used car manager, for instance, how well that used car manager did in their own respective areas. However, 15 or 20 or 25% of the spiff was determined based off how the new car folks did. So that the used car guys were not trying to continuously low bid appraisals and, and send that over to new cars and not enabling them to go win their deals. So instead of having a spiff that pits one against the other, trust me, I like good old competition, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I want collaboration over competition internally, always. Competition is saved for our competitors down the street, when and wherever possible. But the collaboration is what we need to be worried about internally. So that would be an idea that I used to use specifically in the car business, was take a percentage of that spiff and dedicate it to the department that they work closely with, so that I was forcing the collaboration a bit, if you will. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Our next question is, what would be the best way to introduce the customer to the service department after a sale if the service department is completely tied up?
Then it really lies on the salesperson. So I think whether the service department's tied up or not, maybe you missed the introduction to the service manager or service director or the writer or whatever. That doesn't change the fact that they don't really even know those folks yet. But what the important thing on what you want to do is take them physically back there. This I used to do this on every deal. This is where you pull in, honk your horn twice. I would completely line out the first 5 minutes of their experience should they come back. And that's really what you want to do, because it cannot be, if it's foreign to them, anytime something's foreign to somebody, it's just not as easy as it could be with that experience, right? Like, I know the deal. I go in there for service all the time. And they have a loaner car, so normally I don't wait. So they need to make sure that they know those things, because they may look at Jiffy Lube and nobody's setting at Jiffy Lube, which the one right down the street from my office here, nobody's ever at it, and just think that's easy and pull right in there. And because it's an easier thing. When they really, if they would have been lined out ahead of time, and the salesperson should really care about this because it's their customer. And if they want to try to trade that out with an equity offer in 2.5 years, then it's kind of important that they're back in service, which starts with that tour, which really falls on the salesperson. If they're busy, I would go to a GM. When I was GM, I talked to every single customer before they left that bought a car. I wanted to have that conduit to a top-level person so they felt important. And then I would also, if possible, we would go to the service director, service writers, and most of the time there's one available. But the key part of it is that you shepherd them out there, that you show them around town a little bit, take them under your wing a tad, and make sure that they feel comfortable when that time comes for that first scheduled maintenance to pop up.
All right, Chase. Besides tech, how can we speed up the sales process?
You said besides technology?
Yes, besides technology.
I don't know if you said texting. Okay. Besides technology, here's the deal. It boils back down to good old coaching and training, something that I've done other webinars on, but that is not really, in my experience anyway, there's not enough of it in the car business. There's not a lot of one-on-one coaches. The thing I would tell you to do if you're a manager looking to increase this without having any available dollars or changing tech is to ask you this question. Do you have one-on-ones with every one of your employees every month? If you can't answer that question yes, that's where I'd start, because everybody needs one-on-one attention. Not everybody's going to speak up in the sales meeting. And the real problems, with your staff and building that culture, right? Because what you have to do is you have to have a system, right? You have a system. The players come and go. But if you have a culture and a system that is breeding success, that this stuff will start taking care of itself, and you won't necessarily have to go in and recreate the wheel. But what you got to do is start. You got to start building it. And I always tell folks, start with one-on-ones if you're not doing them, and get that feedback, and be a guide to that person who will really tip you off onto what's really going on, even outside of what the data tells you. And will allow you to make changes and process improvements and ultimately have a better conversation. Look, it's you versus the sales guy down the street at the next Chevy store, right? It's you versus him if they're going to buy a Chevy. So you got to focus on the things that are going to do to make you win in that regard. They're all Chevys. They all have the same invoice. They all come from the same place. So it really boils down to experience. So One-on-one coaching will help with the experiences that you provide your customer and give you sustainability. It's not a quick fix. It's not a light switch that you flip. It's something that you got to stoke daily. But if you do it, and over time, if your staff will quit leaving, they won't be a revolving door anymore. They'll be more tenured, and then you're kind of just self-correcting on things because you've got tenured employees that know what you expect and that know that those things breed success because they've had a lot of success themselves. So it's a big thing, right? And it's not a simple answer, but that's where I would start to give you an action item. If you're not doing it now, make sure you're doing one-on-ones with your folks at least twice a month.
All right. Now, if anybody else has any questions, please type them in now. If you've enjoyed this webinar today and you feel that it would be beneficial for someone else in the dealership to see it, we have been recording it, and so you'll get a thank you email from me for attending. And if you just want to reply to that, I'll make sure that you get a link so you can share this webinar with other people in the dealership. If you like what you've seen today, I invite you to please come back to future webinars. I'm sure we'll have Chase back here soon, pretty soon. It looks like that's all the questions that we have, Chase. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today?
No, I just want to, again, say thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I know you guys are busy, and I know it's the end of the year, and everybody's pushing to hit bonuses. So just know that taking the time out to look at something like this, a webinar, to better yourself is a very, very key step and something that you need to keep doing. So I commend you for signing in and keep doing this. Keep the thought process going. And if you guys have any questions at all, my email's up on there right now. Feel free to drop me an email. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'll be glad to spitball with you any old time about how we can all get better. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. Nobody stays the same.
Great. Well, thank you, Chase. Everybody have a great afternoon. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.